The Galactic Council had issued the warning 3 cycles ago. Void stalkers were to be avoided at all costs. Their cubs, born with razor-sharp instincts and void black scales, had torn through military outposts on 7 planets. Even the Kryn warriors, who prided themselves on hunting the most dangerous game in the universe, refused to approach their nesting grounds. But Kale Draven was human, and humans had a particular talent for ignoring sensible warnings. He found the cubs on Tarthos Prime, huddled in the wreckage of their mother's corpse. Poachers had killed her for her scales, leaving 3 newborns to die in the toxic rain. Most species would have walked away. The cubs' eyes glowed with that characteristic crimson hunger, their tiny claws already sharp enough to shred steel. Even at this age, they were killers. Kale knelt in the mud and extended his hand. The largest cub, the one he would later name Vara, lunged at him. Her teeth sank into his forearm, drawing blood that mixed with the rain. Kale didn't flinch. He'd been bitten by worse things on worse planets. He simply waited, letting her tire herself out, then wrapped her in his thermal jacket and gathered her siblings. "Yeah, I know," he muttered as Vara thrashed in his arms. Trust isn't easy, but neither is dying alone in the rain. The journey back to his ship was complicated. The cubs screamed their distress in subsonic frequencies that made his bones ache. They clawed at everything. They refused to eat the protein synthesizers he offered. For 3 days, Kyle barely slept, keeping them warm, cleaning their wounds, speaking to them in the low, steady voice that had calmed frightened creatures across a dozen worlds. On the 4th day, Vara stopped trying to bite him. The Galactic Council was less than pleased when Kale docked at Nexus Station with 3 Void Stalker cubs prowling his cargo hold. The station master, a 4-armed Thessian diplomat named Orcs, nearly had his assistant send an evacuation signal. Those things murdered an entire science team on Calyx 7, Orcs hissed, his translator device crackling with indignation. They're biological weapons. Euthanize them immediately. Kale leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Behind him, Vara sat at attention, her eyes fixed on Orcs with predatory focus. She was already twice the size she'd been when he found her, her scales gleaming like oil slicks under the station lights. "They're cubs," Kale said calmly. They were starving and scared. Any creature acts like a weapon when it's desperate. "Any creature except humans, apparently," Oryx replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You have 48 hours to remove them from this station, Draven. After that, security will handle it." Kyle didn't argue. He'd learned long ago that some minds couldn't be changed with words. Over the next months, Kale did what humans did best. He adapted. He taught the cubs to hunt, but also to restrain themselves. He taught them to recognize friend from foe. He slept among them, ate with them, and when Vara had nightmares about her mother's death, he stayed awake beside her until the trembling stopped. The galaxy watched with morbid fascination. Some called him insane, others called him a liability. But no one could deny the results. The cubs grew strong and disciplined. Vara, in particular, became something unprecedented. A void stalker who obeyed commands, who protected rather than destroyed. The turning point came on Epsilon Reach, a mining colony under siege by the Krev swarm. The insectoid horde had overwhelmed the colony's defenses, and evacuation ships were 3 days out. The miners barricaded themselves in the central hub, awaiting death. Then Kale's ship landed. The Krev had never encountered void stalkers before. They learned quickly. Vara led her siblings through the tunnels like shadows made flesh, their movements perfectly coordinated. Where the swarm relied on overwhelming numbers, the stalkers relied on precision. They struck from darkness, vanished before retaliation, and drove the Krev back with primal terror. But it was Kale who made the difference. He moved with them not as their master but as their partner. He covered their flanks with pulse rifle fire. He treated their wounds with the med kit he always carried. And when Vara took a Krev blade to her shoulder protecting him, he cauterized the wound with his own hands and whispered, "I've got you." By the time the evacuation ships arrived, the Krev were gone. The miners emerged from their shelter to find Kale sitting against a wall, exhausted, with 3 blood-soaked void stalkers resting at his feet. Vara's head lay in his lap, her breathing steady despite her injuries. The story spread like wildfire across the galactic networks. Footage of Kale and his stalkers became the most watched content in Council space. The creatures that had once represented unstoppable death now represented something else entirely. Loyalty earned through compassion. Orcs personally delivered Kale's next contract, an official sanction from the Council to continue his work with xenofauna. The Thessian diplomat looked at Vera, who now stood taller than most humans, and shook his head. "I don't understand your species," Oryx admitted. "Any rational being would have killed those cubs. It was the safe choice, the logical choice." Kyle scratched behind Vera's jaw ridge, and the massive predator made a sound somewhere between a purr and a growl. "Safe and logical doesn't mean right," he said. "These cubs didn't ask to be born dangerous. They just needed someone to believe they could be more than their instincts." He looked up at Oryx, his eyes tired but steady. "That's what humans do. We look at broken things and see potential. We look at monsters and see friends. Maybe it's stupid. Maybe it'll get us killed one day, but maybe that's exactly why the galaxy needs us." Vera nuzzled against his shoulder, and her siblings moved closer, forming a protective circle around their human. They were feared across worlds once. Now they roamed beside someone who'd shown them a different path, and perhaps that was the most terrifying thing about humans. They had a way of turning the galaxy's nightmares into their family.